If 1989 was the year the central government passed away, 1990 was the year the grave for the revolution's regime was dug. It was the period when Villa Somalia lost its final connection with the world and its people. Mogadishu turned into a front line, and friends within the palace began to betray each other to save themselves. The hidden facts of 1990 until the escape on January 26, 1991. What was the final straw? How did Siad Barre exit through the back door of Villa Somalia, hoping to return? Join us for the third part and conclusion of the End of an Era series, but remember, the story doesn't end here. The year 1990 began with the capital, Mogadishu, being cut off from the rest of the world. The USC rebels seized control of all major supply routes to the city. Food and fuel became non-existent, and the government began ruling both soldiers and civilians through fear and hunger. Inside Villa Somalia, the atmosphere was dark. Electricity was often out, and water was delivered by tankers in secret for fear of being burned on the road. There was no trust among the top leaders. Everyone wondered, will I be arrested today, or will it be you? NSS intelligence officers began killing each other inside the presidency, each accusing the other of serving the rebels. In July 1990, a horrific event took place at Mogadishu Stadium during a football match attended by the president. When the crowd began chanting slogans against the government, the Red Beret troops, filled with panic and rage, opened fire with live ammunition on the civilians in the stands. Hundreds of youths lost their lives while the president fled the stadium in shock, surrounded by armored vehicles. This event was a clear sign that the regime could no longer tolerate the voice of the people, leading thousands of previously neutral youths to defect to the rebels that very night to avenge their fallen friends. As the situation reached a critical point, the Manifesto Group tried once more to save the country from total collapse. They issued the second manifesto, explicitly telling the president to hand over power before the city was destroyed. The governments of Italy and Egypt tried to mediate between Siad Barre and the rebels in Cairo, but it failed when the rebels refused to sit with a regime they viewed as bloodthirsty. Siad Barre himself saw the manifesto elders as traitors and chose to resolve the conflict through force. Villa Somalia lost its final chance for a political settlement, and the gun became the only language left for both sides as the capital prepared for its greatest battle. The once famed Somali National Army appeared to be a name only by 1990, as it fractured along clan lines. Many skilled officers fled abroad or secretly led rebels from their own clans. Soldiers on the front lines had not received salaries for a year, and entire units sold their weapons and vehicles to buy food for their children. Clan divisions penetrated the high command, leading to the defiance of presidential orders. When the USC entered the central regions, government troops there began fleeing toward Mogadishu in despair, throwing their weapons into trenches and the wilderness. In September 1990, the war moved to the outskirts of Mogadishu. The USC, led by General Mohamed Farah Aidid, launched successive attacks on army positions near Afgwai and Balkad. The government lost the power to defend its borders, and soldiers began fleeing the front lines, selling their weapons to civilians. Mogadishu entered a state of permanent curfew, and the sound of gunfire never ceased, day or night. What became known as the 4-month war began, where city neighborhoods became deadly battle zones and people were trapped in their homes, dying of hunger and thirst. By the end of 1990, Mogadishu was a city at a standstill where the smell of death filled the air. Hospitals had no medicine, the city's electricity was completely cut off, and water became the most precious commodity. People died just trying to fetch it. Civilians began digging trenches inside their homes to survive the artillery shells. There was no government to respond to public needs. Ministries became empty buildings used by soldiers as bunkers. The population began fleeing the city on foot, and thousands died on the roads out of the city due to hunger and exhaustion. The USC was divided into two wings, a political wing that incited a popular uprising within Mogadishu, and a military wing advancing from the outside. By late December 1990, USC fighters successfully entered northern Mogadishu neighborhoods like Ward Higli and Karen. This caused great panic in Villa Somalia. President Siad Barre began using heavy BM artillery to shell the neighborhoods where rebels were hiding, causing indiscriminate deaths among civilians who were not part of the conflict. As the government was on the brink of collapse, the SNM, USC, and SPM rebels met in Ethiopia to unite their forces and plans. Despite deep clan-based suspicions, their goal was singular: to remove the regime from Villa Somalia at any cost. This alliance weakened Siad Barre's final hope of pitting the rebels against each other. The world then realized that the Somali government's hours were numbered, and the last embassies began evacuating their staff by planes to avoid the impending disaster. On the night of January 25, 1991, the presidency was a burning sight, smelling of ash and blood. Government tanks surrounded the presidential complex, but most of the soldiers inside had fled to their families, realizing it was all over. Siad Barre sat with a few family members and a handful of loyal officers. He hoped until the last minute that troops from Gedo and the south would save him. When USC shells began hitting the palace directly and the roof started collapsing, the president was told he could not stay another minute. In the early hours of January 26, 1991, convoys of armored and luxury vehicles slipped out of the back gate of Villa Somalia. Siad Barre was inside one of those cars, looking out the window for the last time at the city he had ruled for 21 years, now reduced to ashes. They fled towards the southern regions. This escape marked the official fall of the Somali central government, and Mogadishu erupted into chaos and widespread looting of national assets. People flooded the presidency to take whatever was left. When news broke that the presidency was empty, Mogadishu turned into a lawless place where the strong killed the weak. Residents and incoming rebels began looting government offices, banks, and even hospitals. Everything the state owned was pillaged. This was a terrifying time when people began targeting each other based on clan. The once beautiful city turned into a place where corpses lay in the streets, being eaten by dogs with no one to bury them. Villa Somalia fell into the hands of the USC group led by Ali Mahdi Mohammed. Immediately after Siad Barre's departure, a provisional government was announced, but this did not bring peace. The military wing under Gen Aidid was dissatisfied with the appointment, which sparked a new war. Somalia exited a dictatorship only to enter a new darkness, an endless civil war that destroyed what remained of the country. When Siad Barre reached the Gedo region, he did not surrender. Instead, he tried to reorganize a powerful force from his clans to retake Mogadishu. This force, known as the SNF, fought bloody battles against the USC near Mogadishu and the lower Shabelle region. He believed he was still the legitimate president. His journey in Gedo was filled with hardship, eventually facing pressure from both the rebels and the international community to leave the country. The collapse of 1991 was not just the end of Siad Barre. It was a painful lesson for Somalis about the lust for power, injustice, and the weaponization of clan identity. Through this series, we have seen how blood and corruption destroyed an entire nation that once had a functioning state structure. Today, reviewing this history is meant for us to understand where the trouble began so we never fall into that pit again, for a fallen nation is not easily rebuilt. This is the end of the third part of the series, The End of an Era. We have presented 3 years that shocked the world: 1988 to 1991, the darkest years in modern Somali history. Although the president fled Mogadishu, the story does not end here. What happened after Siad Barre left the country? How did the president die in Nigeria? Maksasi Kahare Hantidi Karanka. Join us for part 4. Subscribe to know the facts that follow. Goodbye.